We are going to spend some time, as we do on Fridays, getting a sense of what this campaign is all about. Joining us in studio, as he does each Friday, is Alan Kelly, CEO, founder of the Playmaker systems. One of those systems, something we have often described to you as the periodic table of politics, the standard table of influence strategies, which is available to you at plays2run.com. That is plays, the numeral 2, run.com. Alan, welcome back. Thanks for being here this week.
Plays to Run with that music, it always makes me nervous. I feel like I'm going for a touchdown. He could go all the way.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, it makes me
Kenrick
nervous.
Santorum, go all the way.
Well, maybe. I guess that's the thing to talk about this morning.
So what are you doing to me with this? Bobsled team. John Candy, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I actually interviewed that Jamaican bobsled team when they came to town because they opened up a ride at Paramount's King's Dominion in Virginia the year, and I just happened to be there, and there they were. And
Bobsled, Jamaica bobsled.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about that, and we're talking about something else, too, which is...
Ricky Bobby with yet another impressive win. He is dominating NASCAR.
Woo! First or last, baby! You know it!
I've never seen a driver who wants to win more than this guy.
All right, so why are we talking about the Jamaican bobsled team and NASCAR in the same unusually international breath?
There are two plays that those two examples can depict in this system, in this periodic table of politics that we use. And one is the crowd, and one is, as you might appreciate with your NASCAR background, the draft.
Mm-hmm.
The bobsled thing is simply a way of getting to the point that there are players in a marketplace who just simply want to be in the competition. They have no intention, no hope, no chance to succeed or to win.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to go in and crowd and get a piece of that. An example is Simon Cowell with the X Factor, hoping just to get a piece of American Idol.
Oh, you don't think he wanted to kill them?
It doesn't look like he is. It
No,
looks
I
like,
know,
looks
but I
like
don't know
a
if
crowd.
that was his goal. I think,
No.
But I understand what you're saying. Be a part of getting some of that crowd.
The other play, the draft, is really quite similar, but it's different enough that it should be its own play. Remember, the idea here is to identify a set of stratagems that are, as we say in academia, irreducibly unique.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big goal here with this system. So you've got crowding and you've got drafting. And drafting, as you can guess, is to slip behind. They often call it slipstreaming. It is to feed off of the certain energy and the resources that a front-leading player, often an incumbent, is making and then slowly tiring.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's happened this week, is that Santorum has gone now from a crowder in the same company of the Bachmans and the Huntsman and so on and so forth to becoming a drafter. He is now actively seeking and trailing Romney and looking for weakness and looking for a slow to make a pass.
Mm-hmm.
So we have crowders, we have drafters, we have Jamaica bobsled, we have Ricky Bobby.
Let's listen a little bit to Rick Santorum earlier this week.
Your votes today were not just heard loud and wide across the state of Missouri and Minnesota, but they were heard loud and louder all across this country. And particularly in a place that I suspect, maybe in Massachusetts, they were heard particularly loud tonight.
Now, that was a rather subtle, but, maybe not too subtle, throwdown at Mitt Romney from the East,
right.
And his people.
He recognizes that he's coming up on the leader, and he is just using his moment to make sure that people realize that he is a front runner.
Talk about the Mitt Romney response.
This was a good night for Rick Santorum. Want to congratulate Senator Santorum. Wish him the very best. We'll keep on campaigning down the road, but I expect to become our nominee with your help.
What's that, Alan Kelly?
Dead center in the system is a play called the bear hug.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it before.
Yes,
We've just reformed kind of a move of violent, in a friendly way, violent agreement. Where that's absolutely a fantastic point, Rick. And Rick will sometimes say, that's a great point, Mitt or Newt or whomever. So here he has no choice,
mm-hmm.
but really to, be a gentleman and congratulate him. And so it's a kind of a bear hug. You don't want to do it much because that can radically weaken your brand. You give bear hug and then get off.
Right.
But he had to do that.
Well, the idea is that you have to be somewhat, I guess, ambassadorial, I guess, and you have to be a good sport, if you will, because people like that. I mean, all right, admit the fact that you got beat and say we're going to dust ourselves off. We're going to come back and knock the poop out of you next time we face each other. But that's sort of the American way, right? I mean, the people had made a lot about the fact that Newt Gingrich did not call Mitt Romney anytime Mitt Romney won. And I'm not sure if that's anything to be, long term, if that's a strategy or if it's just Newt Gingrich just doesn't feel like making a phone call to somebody afterwards.
Well, Newt Gingrich feels more and more like a Ron Paul in the way that he really kind of wants to play his own game. And I think it's a big danger. We talked about this last week also. Ron Paul sort of has his game within the game, so much so that he's irrelevant. And I'm not sure that Gingrich reacted to this correctly either. I don't know if we got a clip on him.
We got something of Newt Gingrich. Let's give a listen, because he had a press conference instead of doing a speech after the Tuesday night primaries. A little bit of Newt Gingrich.
I have to confess, I liked the Clint Eastwood halftime ad. I mean, I like the tone of that ad. I like the idea that the world's counted us down before. We're just regrouping. Now,
that was not necessarily about the results this week, but it does sort of exhibit. We heard him talking about moonshots this week and more really big things as opposed to staying on any kind of a message.
That's right. We now got not one, but we've got two candidates who are kind of in their own private Idaho. That's Paul and that's Gingrich. They're not talking about what the press pool, what the zeitgeist is all about at that moment. This week it was about Santorum and his remarkable sweep of 3 supposedly meaningless states, but that was the news.
Right.
And so any candidate has to make a choice. Do I, whatever plays are being run, do I basically counter those plays or do I complement, or I suppose do I ignore them? And in the case of Paul, he's ignoring them, and now Gingrich is talking about Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
That's not the news. That's 2 weeks old.
By the way, Alan Kelly is with us here on POTUS as we discuss the plays for the presidency. PlaystoRun.com is the place to find it. I'm struck how often we see one approach being taken in front of the press, even in debates sometimes, and a different approach being taken on the campaign trail. In other words, Mitt Romney acting one way, not necessarily being uncritical of his opponents, but the sheer volume of attack ads that he has unleashed in Florida against Newt Gingrich, and we saw a little bit more of that in Minnesota for the caucuses this week against Rick Santorum, and we're likely to see a whole lot more of this as time goes by.
Right.
And it happened in 2008, too. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama would debate. They would have some criticisms of one another, but as time wore on, they got a sense that people who were watching didn't want them to be negative on stage. But that didn't mean that on the campaign trail there weren't a lot of negative ads. There was certainly a lot of negative mailing. In other words, you see one face on the TV and one face on the stage and another face which you see represented by the campaign.
Well, proximity reduces negativity.
Okay.
Generally, it's thought.
Oh,
I mean,
someone else got to write down here.
Yeah, that's right down. Oh, yeah, this goes right. If I have a problem with you, here we are 4 feet from each other, then I'm gonna moderate how I present that. But if I go out in the hall and talk to Jared on my way out, I might say it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so, negative ads are absolutely, it's expected that they're run well outside and in a different venue, different context.
A little bit more of Mitt Romney this week, and this again from Tuesday.
I'm the only person in this race, Republican or Democrat, who has never served a day of time in Washington. In the world I come from, leadership is about starting a business, not trying to get a bill out of committee.
And let me just throw something else in here, and this is Rick Santorum this morning on the Today Show.
I think Governor Romney's record and Barack Obama's record, which in a lot of issues are the same, are in fact negative in what they've done to this country and what they did to the state of Massachusetts. And I'll certainly point that out, as I have throughout the course of this campaign. But we're going to talk about things that Americans care about that affect them, not this back and forth that we've seen in this race so far.
Okay, what are the two approaches being taken by those candidates?
Well, there's a couple things going on. Romney gets off the plane after being beaten by Santorum in 3 states, and he says, "Congratulations, Rick." He runs a bear hug, but a bear hug is so interesting because it's almost like a Q in the alphabet, where Qs are almost always followed by U's. Bear hugs are almost always followed by recasts. And that's exactly what he did. He ran the bear hug and then he recasted to say, well, he's a great guy, congratulations, but don't forget, he's a pork barrelist. He's an earmarker supreme. He can't get himself a job out of Washington, blah, 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 blah. And that's what you got to do if you're going to go and embrace somebody. You've got to quickly differentiate yourself. So he's generally very aware now that he's got a drafter. He's got somebody. He's got Dale Earnhardt on Jimmy Johnson's bumper, right? Mm-hmm. He's right there starting to sap him. So he's got to react. He has to counter. Mm-hmm. Now, Santorum, I've forgotten. You
just
played me 2 clips in a row.
Well, the Santorum, he's basically putting Mitt Romney in the same category as President Obama, and essentially saying that they both have records that he is going to run against. And I think this is going back to the whole idea that Mitt Romney's health care plan when he was governor of Massachusetts, very much like that of President Obama. So I'm not sure if he's recasting him, but that seems to be what he keeps pushing him toward. And it was an attack in the last debate that they had, too.
Well, he's running a play that we call a screen. Mm-hmm. It is actually drawn from hunting, if you care, and it is where you're trying to associate yourself or something else with a symbol that's larger than your own rhetoric, your ideas. Mm-hmm. It is Martin Luther King standing in front of the Abraham Lincoln Memorial. It is the symbolism and the attachment is unmistakable. So it is in Santorum's interest to constantly screen Obama and Obamacare and to paste in Romney as an Obamaite, as a centrist, as a moderate guy. So yeah, he'll run screens all day in that regard.
We've got NASCAR and hunting. We're going to bring in bourbon at some point here too, or is this complete the whole Southern stereotypical thing going on? Anyway, Plays to Run with the numeral 2, plays2run.com. Alan Kelly, you're writing about it, and always a pleasure having you in on Fridays. Have a great weekend.
See you next week.
Yes, sir.